Stop the wedding. 2 words. Adrian Valenti's voice cut through the organ music like a blade through silk. Every head in that church turned. Every breath stopped. And Sophia Bennett, standing at the altar in a white dress that felt like a straitjacket, felt something crack open inside her chest. Not heartbreak, but something closer to hope, raw and terrifying and completely uninvited. If you're new here, welcome. Please subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far this story travels. The morning of her wedding, Sophia Bennett sat alone in the bridal suite and stared at the ring on her finger. It was beautiful. Platinum band princess cut diamond. Probably cost more than most people made in a year. Jonathan had presented it to her over dinner 8 months ago in a restaurant full of his business partners, surrounded by people she barely knew, with a photographer already positioned in the corner before he even got down on one knee. She had said yes, not because her heart leaped, not because tears filled her eyes. She had said yes because her father was sitting 2 tables away, watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Desperation wearing the mask of pride. And in that moment, Sophia understood without anyone saying a single word that the question had already been answered before Jonathan ever asked it. She just hadn't been told yet. That was 8 months ago. Now, sitting in front of a mirror, surrounded by white flowers and the soft laughter of bridesmaids she had known for years, but felt completely separated from, Sophia looked at herself and tried to recognize the woman staring back. She was 27 years old. She had a business degree from a university her father had chosen. She had worked 3 years at the family company in a role her father had designed. She had dated men her mother approved of, worn clothes that fit the family image, attended events that built the family name. And now she was marrying a man her father had selected. "Sophia, you look absolutely stunning." Her maid of honor, Claire, appeared behind her in the mirror, adjusting a small curl that had escaped from the elaborate updo. "Jonathan is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Sophia smiled. It was the right shape of a smile. Practiced and warm and completely hollow. "Thank you," she said. Because what else could she say? The truth was too complicated for a morning like this. The truth had arrived 4 hours earlier at 6 in the morning, delivered not by a person, but by a file. Sophia had been unable to sleep. That was nothing new. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch in the last 3 weeks. She had been sitting at the small writing desk in the corner of the hotel suite her family had reserved for the bridal party, scrolling through old emails when she found it. Not in her own inbox. In her father's. She hadn't meant to access it. She used the same laptop for everything, and her father had asked her 2 weeks ago to print something from his account, and she had saved the login credentials without thinking about it. At 6 in the morning, sleepless and anxious, she had opened his email by accident. And then she had not been able to close it. The message was from a law firm, dated 3 months ago. Subject line: Valenti Hale Asset Transfer Final Documentation. Sophia read it 3 times before her hands started shaking. The agreement was 37 pages long. She read every one of them. By the time she finished, the sky outside was getting lighter, and she understood with perfect, terrible clarity exactly what her marriage to Jonathan Hale was designed to accomplish. Her family's company, Bennett Industries, 3 generations old, built by her grandfather with his own hands, was in serious financial trouble. She had known that in a vague, uncomfortable way, the way you know something is wrong in a house, when you can feel a draft but can't find the window. What she had not known was the specifics. Bennett Industries owed $11 million to a collection of lenders. Her father had been managing the crisis quietly for 2 years, moving money, making promises, buying time. Jonathan Hale had appeared 18 months ago as a potential investor. A savior. A man with capital and connections who believed in the company's potential. Sophia's father had believed him. What the documents showed was something different. Jonathan had not come to invest. He had come to acquire the debts her father owed. 3 of the major lenders were shell companies connected to Jonathan's financial network. He had quietly purchased the debt. He owned it. And the agreement, the one signed by her father 6 months ago, the one Sophia had never been told existed, transferred controlling interest of Bennett Industries to Jonathan Hale, upon the legal completion of his marriage to Sophia Bennett. Not investment, not partnership, ownership. Her father had signed away the company, and he had used his daughter as the instrument of the transaction. Sophia sat at the desk for a long time after she finished reading. She thought about crying. She thought about screaming. She thought about walking out of the hotel, getting into a cab, and never looking back. Instead, she closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under the water until it ran cold. Then she put on the dress, because she didn't know what else to do yet. The church was beautiful. St. Catherine's, built in 1887, all dark wood and stained glass, and the kind of solemn grandeur that made ordinary people feel small and important at the same time. 300 guests, flowers everywhere, white roses and lily of the valley. Sophia's mother's choices, because nobody had asked Sophia what flowers she preferred. Sophia stood at the back of the nave with her father, waiting for the organ to signal their walk. Her father looked magnificent in his mourning suit. Gray at his temples, straight-backed every inch the patriarch. People looked at him and saw dignity. Sophia looked at him and saw the signature at the bottom of a 37-page document. "You look beautiful," he said softly without looking at her. "Dad." Her voice was very quiet, steady in a way that surprised her. "I read the agreement." The pause that followed lasted 3 seconds. She counted them. "Sophia. The one with Jonathan. The asset transfer. The shell companies." She kept her eyes forward, watching the guests settle into their pews. "I read all of it." Her father's hand resting on her arm tightened slightly. "This isn't the time." "When is the time, Dad?" She finally looked at him. "After the wedding, after the signatures, after it's too late for me to do anything about it." He looked old suddenly. That was what struck her. Not guilt, not anger, but age. He looked like a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had finally stopped pretending it wasn't heavy. "The company would have collapsed," he said. "Everything your grandfather built, everything I spent my life protecting, it would have been gone. So you sold me instead." "I made a business arrangement." "You sold me," she said again. Quiet, clear, absolutely certain. Her father closed his eyes. "If you refuse this, we lose everything. The company, the house, everything. Your mother, your sister, they lose everything. Jonathan will call in the debt immediately. I have no way to cover it." He opened his eyes. "I know what I'm asking. I know it isn't fair. But sometimes life asks us to sacrifice. Don't." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Don't tell me this is a sacrifice. Sacrifices are voluntary. This is a transaction. I am the currency." The organ began. The signal. Her father straightened. His hand pressed against her arm with gentle, inexorable pressure. "Please," he whispered. "For the family." And Sophia, because she had spent 27 years being the daughter who held everything together, who smoothed conflicts and absorbed pain, and smiled through things that deserved tears. Sophia walked forward. Jonathan Hale was waiting at the altar. How was handsome in this way expensive things are handsome, polished, deliberate, designed to impress. His suit was custom. His smile was practiced. His eyes, when they found Sophia walking toward him, held something she had always told herself was warmth. She understood now that it was satisfaction. The satisfaction of a man watching an acquisition arrive. She walked down the aisle and felt 300 pairs of eyes on her, and she smiled because the alternative was to collapse, and she had not yet decided whether she was strong enough to collapse in front of everyone. Jonathan took her hands when she reached him. His grip was firm, proprietary. "You look perfect," he murmured. She thought about the word perfect. How it meant exactly the right thing, not beautiful, not wonderful, not like herself. Perfect, conforming to specification. The priest began. The ceremony unfolded the way ceremonies do, when they have been planned to the minute, every element controlled, every emotion choreographed. Sophia heard the words from somewhere slightly outside herself, the way you hear music through a wall. She was aware of the weight of the dress. She was aware of Jonathan's hands holding hers. She was aware of her mother in the front row, handkerchief pressed to her eyes, and her younger sister beside her, and her father now standing to the side, watching with an expression that Sophia finally recognized after 27 years of misreading it. Relief. He already felt relief, because for him, this was already done. The priest's voice rose toward the question. Do you take this man to be your husband, to have and to hold from this day forward? The doors opened, not loudly. That was the thing that struck her first, the absence of drama in the opening itself. No crash, no bang. The great wooden doors simply swung apart, and light came in from the steps outside, and then a silhouette appeared in that light that made every person in the church go completely still. Like prey, recognizing a predator. Like a room full of people who had spent their lives in the upper circles of the city, suddenly understanding that something had entered their world that operated by entirely different rules. Adrian Valenti walked into St. Catherine's Church, the way he walked into every room, like the room had been waiting for him and simply hadn't known it yet. He was tall, dark-suited, unhurried. He did not look at the priest. He did not look at Jonathan. He looked at Sophia. Stop the wedding. His voice carried without effort, the way the voice of a man carries when he has spent years saying things that people needed to hear whether they wanted to or not. 300 people exhaled at the exact same moment. Jonathan's hands still holding Sophia's went rigid. What is this? Jonathan's voice was controlled, but Sophia felt the tension travel up his arms into his grip, and she recognized it, because she had learned in the past 8 months to read his moods through the pressure of his hands rather than his face. Who let you in here? Adrian continued walking up the center aisle. He moved slowly, not because he was uncertain, but because a man who is genuinely dangerous never needs to rush. Every step was measured, every movement deliberate. The guests on either side drew back, not dramatically, not with panic, but the way people naturally create space for something that commands space. I said stop. Security. Jonathan released Sophia's hands and turned, addressing someone at the side of the church. Remove this man. 2 large men in dark suits moved forward from their positions near the doors. Adrian didn't slow down. He didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on Sophia, and the 2 security men, after taking 3 steps in his direction, stopped. Just stopped. Sophia didn't understand it at first. Then she noticed what she had been too shocked to register before: the 4 men who had followed Adrian through the church doors and now stood at even intervals across the back of the nave, hands at their sides, still as statues, saying nothing. Just present. Just watching. The security men looked at each other. They did not move again. Get out of my church. Jonathan's voice had dropped, which Sophia had learned was more dangerous than when it rose. Get out before I have you removed by the police. Adrian stopped walking. He was 10 feet from the altar now. He looked at Jonathan for the first time, and something passed across his face that Sophia couldn't fully name. It wasn't hatred, and it wasn't contempt, and it wasn't anger. It was something quieter, and somehow more frightening than all of those. It was the expression of a man who knows something that you don't, and is deciding how much of it to reveal. Jonathan Hale. Adrian's voice was conversational. You want to involve the police? Get out. Then let's talk about Meridian Capital and Coastal Bridge Holdings and the $11 million in debt you purchased under those names so you could own a man's desperation and his daughter at the same time. Adrian tilted his head slightly. You want police in the room for that conversation? The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Sophia felt it pressing against her chest. She saw her father off to the side go very pale. She saw Jonathan's jaw tighten. She saw a flicker move through his eyes, not fear exactly, but the recognition of a threat that had real teeth. I don't know what you're... Meridian Capital LLC, Adrian said. Registered in Delaware. Beneficial owner Jonathan Hale, through 2 intermediate holding companies. He paused. Coastal Bridge Holdings registered in Nevada. Same beneficial owner. Another pause. Both purchased existing debt instruments originally held by 3 separate commercial lenders. Both sent formal acceleration notices to Bennett Industries 6 months after acquisition. He looked at Sophia's father. Is that accurate, Richard? Her father said nothing. His silence was its own answer. "Who are you?" Sophia heard herself ask. It wasn't the question she had planned to ask. She hadn't planned to ask anything. She had been standing at the altar in complete shock, her voice somewhere below the surface of herself, and then suddenly it came up on its own, and that was the question it chose. Adrian turned his gaze to her. Up close, he was different from what she had expected. She had heard the name Adrian Valenti before everyone in this city had, in the way everyone knows the name of a storm system that keeps appearing on the weather map. Powerful, potentially catastrophic, something to be watched and avoided. But the man standing 10 feet from her looked at her not like a storm, and not like a criminal, and not like the stories people told. He looked at her like someone who had been waiting a very long time for a conversation. "My name is Adrian Valenti," he said, "and I'm here because someone should have told you the truth a long time ago." Jonathan moved. Not toward Adrian. He was not a physically reckless man, but toward Sophia, closing the distance between them with 2 quick steps and taking her arm above the elbow with a grip that was firm enough to communicate exactly what it meant. "This man is a criminal," Jonathan said loudly, addressing not just Sophia, but the entire church, playing to the room the way he always played to rooms. "He's dangerous. Whatever he's told you, whatever story he's constructed to walk in here today, it's manipulation. It's what men like him do." Sophia looked at Jonathan's hand on her arm. She looked at Adrian. "Let her make up her own mind," Adrian said. To Jonathan. Quiet. Final. "She is my fiancée. She's a person." Adrian's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Not a contract, not an acquisition. A person. And she deserves to hear what you actually did before she signs her name to any of it." "Get your hand off my arm," Sophia said. Jonathan looked at her. "Sophia, let go." Something in her voice made him release her. She stepped back half a step, creating distance that felt enormous in the context of where they were and what they were supposed to be doing. "Tell me about Meridian Capital," she said to Jonathan. His expression shifted through several things quickly: surprise, calculation, decision. "This isn't the place." "Tell me about Meridian Capital," she said again. "We should talk about this privately." "Jonathan." Her voice was the same voice she had used with her father in the entryway. Quiet. Clear. Absolutely certain. "I read the agreement. I read the whole thing. I know about the shell companies. I know what the asset transfer clause says." She watched his face. "What I don't know is whether everything this man just said is true. So tell me, right now, in front of everyone, tell me it isn't." The church was so quiet, she could hear her own heartbeat. Jonathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Adrian. Then he looked back at her, and the warmth that she had spent 8 months telling herself was real was entirely, completely gone. And what was underneath it was something she recognized from the documents she had read that morning. Calculation. "We are getting married," Jonathan said, "and we are going to discuss the rest of it later." "No," Sophia said. "We're not." Jonathan turned back to Adrian, and the pretense dropped entirely. "You have no idea what you're walking into," he said. "No idea. Whatever debt you think gives you the right to interfere in my life." "I don't have a debt," Adrian said calmly. "She does." "What?" Jonathan went still. Adrian looked at Sophia. His expression was careful now, deliberate, reading her in a way that felt more like respect than intrusion. "7 years ago," he said. "A warehouse fire on the east side. 23 people. The building owner wanted to settle quietly, and the main witness was threatened into silence." He paused. "You testified anyway. A woman named Maria Castellano kept her housing because someone refused to be intimidated away from the truth." Sophia stared at him. She remembered it. She had been 20, working her first internship, completely out of her depth, terrified. She had testified because she couldn't live with herself if she didn't. She had never known what happened to the case afterward. She had filed her testimony and gone home and never spoken about it again. "Maria Castellano is my aunt," Adrian said. The church was absolutely silent. "She raised me," he said. "After my mother died. She kept a roof over my head when there was no reason anyone should have bothered. And 7 years ago, she would have lost that roof if not for a 20-year-old woman who showed up and told the truth when she didn't have to. Sophia felt something move through her that she couldn't name. "You came here because of that?" she asked. "I came here because I pay my debts," Adrian said. "And because when I found out what was being done to you, the only acceptable thing I could do was walk through that door." He looked at Jonathan. "The debt she was owed," he said quietly, "is paid." Jonathan's composure, that magnificent polished surface, cracked along a very specific line. "This is a performance," he said, addressing the guests, addressing the room, addressing the cameras that someone had definitely hired to document this as a wedding. "This man is a known associate of organized crime. He walks into a church and tells a romantic story about a debt, and you're all going to believe it. He's here to embarrass me. He's here to destabilize a legitimate business relationship because the Valenti organization has competing interests." "Say that again," Adrian said. Jonathan paused. "Call it a performance again," Adrian said. "And then explain to everyone in this room why my investigators spent 3 weeks documenting exactly what you did to this family. Explain why your own lawyers drafted a clause that only transfers company control upon legal marriage, not engagement, not partnership marriage. Explain why you needed a wife instead of a business partner. That's standard. A wife can't testify against her husband." Adrian let that land. A wife can't report corporate fraud committed during the marriage without implicating herself. A wife who is also the daughter of the majority shareholder gives you access to the board without a shareholder vote. He paused. "Which part of that is standard?" The room was not 300 neutral observers anymore. Sophia could feel the shift. The way the crowd's relationship to the moment was changing. The way people were leaning forward, or sitting back, or exchanging glances that meant they were doing math in their heads. Her mother had gone completely still in the front row. Her father had sat down on a pew, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man whose legs had stopped working. Her sister was looking at Sophia with an expression that Sophia had never seen on her face before, wide-eyed, raw, and deeply, completely sorry. "Sophia." Jonathan stepped toward her again. "This man is dangerous. Whatever he's told you, whatever he thinks he's doing here, you need to step away from him, and you need to think about what you're risking. Your family." "My family," Sophia said, "signed a contract selling me to you." "That's not." "That is exactly what it is." For the first time all morning, her voice had texture to it. Not anger, something more fundamental. Clarity. "I read it this morning. I read every page. My name is referenced 14 times in that agreement, and I am never described as a person. I'm described as a mechanism of transfer, a legal instrument." She looked at him steadily. "You don't love me. You've never loved me. I think you are actually incapable of it. And I spent 8 months trying to convince myself that the way you look at me was warmth when the whole time it was just—" She paused, finding the word accounting. Jonathan stared at her. "If you walk away from this marriage," he said quietly, "I will call in every debt your father owes by end of business Monday. I will take the company. I will take the house. I will take everything your family has." His voice was low, meant only for her now. "Is that what you want? For everyone you love to lose everything because you got cold feet? Are you threatening her?" Adrian's voice came from 10 feet away and somehow felt closer than that. "This is a private conversation." "In a church full of witnesses," Adrian said, "with at least one journalist in the third row who I recognize from the business section of the Tribune." He didn't look at anyone as he said it. "Keep going." Jonathan stopped. For the first time since he had appeared at the altar that morning, Sophia saw something genuine on his face. Fear. Not of losing her. Not of the relationship ending. Fear of exposure. Fear of the documents. Fear of a man standing 10 feet away who apparently knew where all the bodies were buried and had decided this was the day to start pointing. "This isn't over," Jonathan said. He said it to Adrian, but he was looking at Sophia. She looked back at him, and she felt something leave her in that moment. Not hope, because she had already let go of that, but the last thread of the story she had been telling herself for 8 months. The story where she could make this work. The story where she was capable of turning this transaction into something real. The story where being a good wife and a sacrificial daughter was the same as having a life. She let it go. I can't do this, she said. Not to Jonathan. Not to Adrian. Not to the 300 people watching. To herself. Out loud. In public. For the first time in 27 years. What followed was not dramatic in the way movies made drama. Jonathan didn't rage. He went cold, the way powerful men go cold when they understand the terrain has shifted and they need to recalculate. He turned and walked out through a side door, and the click of it closing behind him was somehow louder than anything else that had happened in the last 20 minutes. The guests didn't know what to do, which meant they stayed very still and very quiet, and waited for someone to tell them. The priest stood at the altar with the expression of a man who had officiated 400 weddings and never encountered anything like this, and was genuinely unsure what canon law had to say about the situation. Sophia's mother rose from the front pew and walked up the aisle toward her daughter. She stopped 3 feet away. Her eyes were red. Not from the wedding the crying had stopped when the doors opened. Now she just looked like herself, without the careful presentation she normally wore. And what Sophia saw underneath was something complicated and guilty and exhausted. Sophia. Mom. Sophia shook her head. Not right now. Her mother closed her mouth. Her father was still sitting on the pew. He hadn't moved. Sophia looked at Adrian. Why didn't you come sooner? She asked. She didn't mean it as an accusation. She genuinely wanted to know. I didn't know sooner, he said. I found out 3 weeks ago. I started verifying because I don't walk into a situation like this without making certain first. He paused. I would have preferred to tell you privately, given you time to process it. Make the choice without an audience. I read the agreement this morning, Sophia said. 6 hours ago. He was quiet for a moment. Are you all right? It was such a simple question. It was the first simple question anyone had asked her all day, all month, maybe in longer than she could immediately measure. She felt her throat tighten. No, she said honestly. But I will be. Adrian nodded once. What do you need? He asked. Sophia looked around the church. 300 people. The priest. The flowers. The elaborate architecture of a wedding that had been designed around everything except what she actually wanted. I need to get out of this dress, she said. Something almost like a smile crossed Adrian Valenti's face. There's a car outside, he said. I'm not going anywhere with you, she said. I don't know you. Fair, he said. But I'm also not staying here. Also fair. She looked at her sister still sitting in the front row with that wide, sorry expression. Lily, she said, come with me. Lily Bennett stood up immediately. No hesitation. She walked up the aisle and took her sister's hand, and together they walked toward the back of the church past Adrian Valenti, past his 4 quiet men at the doors, past 300 people who parted for them without being asked. Sophia did not look back. She walked out of St. Catherine's Church into the autumn light, still in the wedding dress, her sister's hand in hers, and behind her she heard the sounds of a room full of people who had just witnessed something they would be describing for years. She walked to the end of the block. She sat down on a bench. She breathed. Lily sat beside her and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. After a long time, Sophia said, I need a lawyer. Okay, Lily said. And I need Dad's business records. Everything. Not just what Jonathan's documents show, everything from the last 3 years. Okay. And I need to think. Okay, Lily said again. A car had followed them at a distance. Sophia was aware of it without looking directly at it. Dark. Quiet. Staying half a block back. Just present. Just watching. She thought about a man who had walked into a church full of powerful people for no reason, except that he believed he owed a debt to someone who had told the truth 7 years ago. She thought about the fact that of all the people in her life, her father, her mother, her fiancé, her colleagues, her friends, the one person who had walked through that door for her specifically for no other reason with nothing to gain, was a man whose name everyone said like a warning. She looked at her sister. What do you know about Adrian Valenti? She asked. Lily thought for a moment. I know everyone's afraid of him, she said. Everyone's afraid of Jonathan too, Sophia said. But for a different reason. What's the difference? Sophia thought about Adrian's face when he had asked her if she was all right. She thought about the way he had said a person when Jonathan had said fiancé. Jonathan wants you afraid of him, she said, slowly working it out. It gives him control. She paused. I don't think Adrian wants that at all. She stood up from the bench. She straightened the dress as much as it could be straightened. Come on, she said to her sister. We have work to do. Behind them, half a block back, the dark car stayed where it was. Watching. Waiting. Not following. Just there. And that careful, patient, undemanding presence was the first thing in a very long time that felt to Sophia Bennett like it might be trustworthy. Sophia Bennett spent the first night after her almost wedding on her sister's couch, still in the slip she'd been wearing under the dress, because she had left St. Catherine's Church with nothing except her phone, her purse, and the wreckage of a life she had been building in the wrong direction for years. Lily had given her a blanket and a glass of water, and then wisely gone to bed without asking the questions that were clearly pressing against the inside of her mouth, trying to get out. Sophia lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and did not sleep. She made a list in her head. Not an emotional list, she was too exhausted for emotion right now. A practical list. The kind you make when everything has fallen apart and you need something concrete to hold on to. First, she needed a lawyer. Not the family lawyer who had been her father's attorney for 20 years and had almost certainly reviewed the agreement she'd found that morning. Someone new. Someone who had no relationship with anyone in her life. Second, she needed copies of everything. The agreement, the shell company filings, the debt documentation. Everything Adrian Valenti had referenced in that church needed to exist in her hands, not just in her memory. Third, she needed to understand what Jonathan's next move was going to be. That last one was the one that kept her awake. Because Jonathan Hale was not a man who accepted losses. She understood that now with a clarity she hadn't possessed 8 months ago, when she was telling herself that his controlled, precise nature was a form of strength. It wasn't strength. It was the behavior of someone who needed to win every exchange, every negotiation, every room he walked into. She had just refused him in front of 300 people. He was not going to let that go. Her phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. Unknown number. She stared at it for 3 rings before she answered. You should get some sleep. Adrian Valenti's voice was calm the way it had been in the church. Like a man who had simply decided that anxiety was not useful and had stopped producing it. Sophia sat up. You have my number, she said. I have a lot of things, he said. I thought about not calling, but then I thought you were probably lying awake making a list of problems, and I thought it might help to know that you don't have to solve all of them tonight. She was quiet for a moment. Are you having me watched? She asked. Not accusation. Honest question. My men confirmed you got to your sisters safely, he said. That's all. That's not nothing. No, he agreed. It isn't. But Jonathan has people too, and right now he's angry, and I'd rather you were somewhere safe than somewhere I had to worry about. I didn't ask you to worry about me. You didn't have to. Sophia pulled the blanket tighter. What does he do next? She asked. Jonathan, what's his move? A brief pause on the line. He applies pressure, Adrian said. He's already done it once tonight. I'd guess he's contacted your father in the last few hours. He'll try to work through people you trust. He'll remind your father what's at stake. He'll give the impression that this can all be resolved quietly if you simply reconsider. Reconsider. He'll frame it as a moment of panic, understandable nerves. He'll tell your father that he's willing to be gracious about what happened in the church, that he's not angry, that the two of you can still move forward. Sophia felt her jaw tighten. And my father will believe him. Your father wants to believe him, Adrian said quietly. That's not the same thing, but it functions the same way. She thought about her father sitting on that pew, that quiet, collapsed stillness. The look of a man who had been holding something up for so long that when it finally came down, he didn't even have the energy to react. He's not a bad man, she said. And then before Adrian could respond, she added, I know how that sounds. "It sounds like someone who loves her father," he said. "He sold me." "He also sat in that church and didn't stop you from walking out," Adrian said. "I watched him. He could have intervened. He didn't." Sophia hadn't thought about that. She hadn't thought about what it had looked like from the outside, her father sitting down on that pew, not moving, not speaking, not doing anything. She had interpreted it as defeat, as a man who had stopped trying because he'd already gotten what he wanted. But he could have stood up. He could have said something. He could have demanded she stay, and given everything she knew about the shape of her own obedience. She wasn't entirely certain she wouldn't have listened. He had let her go. She didn't know what to do with that. "Get some sleep," Adrian said again. "Tomorrow is going to be complicated, and you're going to need to be sharp." "Why do you care?" she asked. "The debt is paid. You said so yourself. Maria Castellano's debt is paid. You walked through the door. You did what you came to do. Why are you still involved?" The pause this time was longer. "Because Jonathan Hale is going to make the next few weeks very difficult for you," Adrian said finally. "And because I started something today by walking into that church. I don't walk away from things I start." "That's not an answer to why you care." Another pause. "No," he said. "It isn't." He didn't give her a better one. She fell asleep at 3:30 with the phone still in her hand. Her father called at 7 in the morning. She was already awake. She had been lying there since 6, watching the gray light come through the gap in Lily's curtains, thinking about everything she needed to do and the specific order in which she needed to do it. She answered on the second ring. "Sophia." Her father's voice was careful. The voice he used when he was managing a difficult conversation, measuring every word before he committed to it. She knew that voice as well as she knew her own. She had grown up listening to it across boardroom tables and dinner tables, and every table in between. "We need to talk." "I know," she said. "Jonathan has agreed." "Dad." She stopped him there. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to actually hear it, and not just wait for the pause, so you can respond with a counter-proposal." She sat up. "I am not marrying Jonathan Hale. That decision is made. It was made yesterday. Nothing Jonathan agrees to, offers, proposes, or threatens is going to change it. Are you hearing me?" Silence. "The company. I know about the company. I know about the debt. I know about Meridian Capital and Coastal Bridge Holdings." She paused. "I know about all of it, Dad. I've known since yesterday morning, and I still walked down that aisle, and even then I couldn't do it. So whatever argument you're about to make about sacrifice, I need you to understand that I have already measured the sacrifice and found it unacceptable." Her father was quiet for a long moment. "He'll call in the debt Monday," her father said. "He's already told me." "I know. We can't cover it." "I know." "Sophia, the house. I know about the house, Dad." Her voice cracked slightly. She let it. She was done managing her own reactions to make things easier for other people. "I know what we lose. I've known since 6 o'clock yesterday morning, and I still walked down that aisle ready to give him what he wanted because I couldn't figure out another way to protect you." She breathed. "But I couldn't say the words. I stood there, and I could not make myself say them. And then that door opened, and I understood that I was looking for permission from somewhere to say no, and I finally found it. From a mafia boss," her father said. "Not cruelly, just exhausted." "From myself," Sophia corrected him. "He just opened the door." She heard her father breathe. "There has to be a way to fix this," he said. "There might be," she said. "But it doesn't involve me marrying Jonathan. So if you're willing to work with me instead of around me for once in your life, then let's talk about what it does involve." Her father was quiet for a long time. "What do you need?" he asked. It was the second time in 24 hours someone had asked her that question. She made a note of the difference between the people who asked it and the people who didn't. She met her father for coffee at 9. Not at the family house. She wasn't ready for that yet. A small place 3 blocks from Lily's apartment, the kind of unremarkable diner that nobody important ever chose, which meant it was exactly the right place for a conversation she needed to have without an audience. Her father looked like he had aged 5 years overnight. She sat across from him and looked at the man she had spent her entire life trying not to disappoint, and she understood something she hadn't been able to see before, that the disappointment had always been mutual, and it had never been her fault. "Tell me everything," she said. "From the beginning. Not the version where you managed it, the real version." He did. It took 40 minutes. He talked, and she listened, and she did not interrupt him even when she wanted to, even when the details made her stomach turn, even when she recognized moments in the narrative where she had been standing right there and had been carefully, deliberately kept from the truth. When he finished, she had a complete picture for the first time. Bennett Industries had been in trouble for 4 years. Not terminal trouble, not at the beginning manageable difficulty that had become serious and then severe because of a combination of bad contracts, a failed expansion, and 2 key clients leaving in the same quarter. Her father had not panicked. He had done what he always did. He had controlled the narrative, bought time, and looked for a solution. Jonathan Hale had appeared as a solution. He had come through a mutual contact, a man her father trusted, and he had presented himself as an investor with a genuine interest in the company's future. The early conversations were legitimate. The due diligence was real. The initial terms were reasonable. Then gradually they shifted. Jonathan suggested that a formal partnership, a legal permanent connection between the families, would make investors more confident. A merger of business and personal life, the way great fortunes had always been built. Her father had been 56 years old and exhausted and looking at the possible destruction of everything he had spent his life building. He had a daughter who was smart and capable and had always done what was needed, and Jonathan had been very persuasive about what was needed. "Did you know," Sophia asked when he finished, "about the shell companies, about Meridian and Coastal Bridge?" Her father looked at his coffee. "I knew Jonathan had purchased some of the debt," he said quietly. "I told myself it meant he was genuinely invested in the company's survival. I told myself a man doesn't buy debt in a company he plans to destroy." "But you knew." "I knew some of it. Did you read the agreement you signed, the full asset transfer clause?" His silence was its own kind of answer. Sophia looked at him for a long time. "He told you not to worry about the details," she said. "He told you the lawyers had reviewed everything and it was standard." Her father looked up. "How did you know that?" "Because that's what he does," she said. "He tells people not to worry about the details. He positions himself as the person who handles complexity so you don't have to. And then the details are where everything important is hidden." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "He did it to me too. 8 months of it. Don't worry about the guest list, I'll handle it. Don't worry about the venue, I'll handle it. Don't worry about the prenuptial agreement, the lawyers will sort it out." Everything was handled. I was just supposed to show up and smile. Her father put his face in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not managed, not careful, just the bare thing itself." "Sophia, I am so sorry." She had expected that apology to feel like more. Like relief or release, or the satisfying click of a thing finally falling into its right place. Instead, it just felt like a beginning. "I know," she said. "We'll deal with that later. Right now, I need you to give me access to every financial record from the last 4 years. Everything. Don't filter it, don't summarize it. Don't give me the version you think I should see." She looked at him steadily. "I need the real thing." Her father nodded. "There's one more thing," Sophia said. "Adrian Valenti." Her father went very still. "What about him?" "What do you know about him? Actually know, not what you've heard." Her father thought for a moment. "His family has been in this city for 3 generations. His grandfather was connected to Italian organized crime in the 60s and 70s. His father expanded into other things. Adrian inherited it at 24 when his father died. He's made the organization more." He searched for the word sophisticated. "Less violent from what I understand, but still very much operating outside the law." "Has he ever had business with Bennett Industries?" "No." "Has he ever had business with Jonathan?" Her father hesitated. "Not directly," he said. "But there have been overlapping interests. Commercial real estate, some city development contracts. Jonathan has worked hard to keep Adrian Valenti out of certain markets. How hard? Hard enough that people noticed. Sophia absorbed this. So Jonathan and Adrian have a history. A complicated one. And yesterday, Adrian walks into the church. I don't think it was only about the debt, her father said. And then he stopped himself. I'm sorry, I shouldn't speculate. No, Sophia said. I need you to speculate. I need all the information I can get, and I need people to stop protecting me from it. She looked at him. Why do you think he came? Her father was quiet for a long moment. I think Adrian Valenti and Jonathan Hale have been circling each other for years, he said slowly. And I think yesterday was a convenient opportunity for Adrian to establish something. At my expense. Possibly. He paused. Or possibly the debt was entirely real and Jonathan's involvement was a secondary benefit. I don't know him well enough to tell you which. Sophia thought about a voice on the phone at 2 a.m. The question she had asked, why do you care? And the answer that wasn't quite an answer. She thought about the car that had stayed half a block back, not following, just there. She thought about the word trust and how completely it had failed her in the last 24 hours from every direction she had previously relied on. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Different from last night's. She answered. Ms. Bennett. The voice was professional female crisp. My name is Catherine Reyes. I'm an attorney. I was asked to reach out to you this morning regarding your legal situation. Who asked you? A brief pause. A mutual acquaintance suggested your need was urgent, the woman said carefully. Sophia looked at her father. Adrian Valenti sent you, she said. I represent several clients whose identities I keep confidential, the woman said. What I can tell you is that I specialize in corporate fraud, financial misconduct, and asset recovery. And based on what I've been briefed on, you have an extremely compelling case. I haven't retained you, no, but I'm available today if you'd like to change that. The documents you found yesterday, the agreement, the shell company filings, those are the beginning, not the end. If Jonathan Hale did what it appears he did, there are multiple legal avenues that could not only protect your family's assets, but potentially reverse the debt arrangements entirely. Sophia was quiet. He's trying to help me, she said. Not to Catherine Reyes, half to herself. I couldn't speak to anyone's motivations, the attorney said. I can speak to the strength of your legal position, which is considerably better than you may realize this morning. Sophia picked up her coffee cup. She put it down. She thought about a man she didn't know who had walked into a church for her, who had called her at 2 a.m. to tell her to sleep, who had sent a lawyer to her before she'd even finished breakfast, who asked for nothing in return except... She stopped. That was the part she kept coming back to. What did he want in return? Because in her experience, nobody did this without wanting something. Her father had wanted her obedience. Jonathan had wanted her name and her silence. Even the people who loved her had always wanted a version of her that was easier to manage. Adrian Valenti was offering help with no visible price attached. That was either the most generous thing she had encountered in years, or it was the most sophisticated manipulation she had ever seen. She needed to know which. I'll meet you in an hour, she told Catherine Reyes. She needed to know which one it was. She met the attorney at a downtown office that was clean, professional, and completely anonymous, the kind of place that processed important information without drawing attention to itself. Catherine Reyes turned out to be a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a direct manner that Sophia found immediately useful. She laid out everything she knew across the next 2 hours. The agreement, the shell companies, the debt structure, the asset transfer clause, the timeline of Jonathan's involvement with her family. Catherine Reyes listened, made notes, and asked precise questions that revealed she already knew more about the situation than could have been explained in a simple briefing. You've been looking into this already, Sophia said. I've been provided with a significant amount of documentation, Catherine said carefully, by Adrian Valenti. By sources I'm not at liberty to. Ms. Reyes. Sophia looked at her directly. I need to understand exactly what I'm walking into here. If Adrian Valenti has been building a case against Jonathan for whatever reason, and I am now part of that case, I need to know that. I am not going to be anyone's instrument. I was almost someone's instrument yesterday. I am done with that. Catherine studied her for a moment. Then she made a decision. What I can tell you, she said, is that the documentation I received is thorough, accurate, and focused entirely on Jonathan Hale's financial activities. None of it implicates you. None of it was gathered in a way that suggests you are part of a larger strategy. She paused. The person who provided it to me asked me to represent your interests, not his, not any other clients, yours. And you believed that. I'm a corporate attorney, Ms. Bennett. I don't operate on belief. I operate on what the documents say. She tapped the papers on the desk between them. These documents say that someone spent 3 weeks building a case that specifically protects you. If there's another agenda underneath it, I haven't found it. And I've been looking. Sophia sat with that. It was the most honest thing she'd heard all day. She retained Catherine Reyes at noon. She called Adrian at 1. You sent me a lawyer, she said when he picked up. I sent you a name, he said. You made the call. That's a technical distinction. Most important distinctions are technical. She stood at Lily's window watching the street below. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly, she said. I'll try. Is this about Jonathan? Is that what this is? You and Jonathan have been competing over markets for years, and She stopped herself. Am I leverage? The silence on the other end was longer than usual. No, he said finally. That's not enough. I know. Another pause. Jonathan Hale has been a problem in this city for a long time. What he did to your family is not unique. He's done versions of it to 3 other families in the last 6 years. All of them quieter. All of them resolved before they became public, because the people involved were too afraid or too compromised to fight back. He paused. You asked me yesterday why I care. That's part of it. Not because it benefits me to expose him. Because it's right. That's a very noble answer for a mafia boss. I never said I was noble, he said. I said it was right. Those aren't the same thing. She thought about that. What's the rest of it? She asked. You said that's part of it. What's the other part? This silence was the longest one yet. You testified in that hearing because it was the right thing to do, he said finally. You were 20 years old, and nobody would have blamed you for walking away, and you didn't walk away. He paused. I've spent a lot of years in rooms full of people who talk about what they value. You're the first one I've found in a long time who pays the actual price for it. Sophia felt something move in her chest. She didn't answer that. She wasn't ready to. Jonathan called my father again this morning, she said instead. I know. He's giving us until Monday. I know that too. Catherine thinks we can challenge the debt instruments. The shell company structure may have violated disclosure requirements when my father signed the original agreement. Catherine is good at what she does, Adrian said. If the debt instruments are invalid, Jonathan can't call them in. Correct. But it takes time to prove that, and he's going to escalate before we have the proof. Yes, Adrian said. So what do we do between now and then? We make sure he knows that escalating costs him more than waiting. How do we do that? We let him know that everything he's done to your family is documented, that the documentation exists in multiple locations, that using any of his leverage against you or your father causes that documentation to become very, very public. Sophia understood. Mutually assured destruction, she said. It's been effective since 1950, Adrian said. She almost laughed. She didn't quite. He's not going to accept a standoff, she said. He needs to win. I know. So this buys time, but it doesn't solve the problem. No, Adrian agreed. The legal process solves the problem. This buys Catherine the time she needs. Sophia thought. What does this cost me? She asked. Your help. What does this cost? Nothing, he said. That's not how things work. It's how this works. Why? Because I'm not Jonathan, he said. Quiet. Final. And I'm tired of people assuming I am. She held the phone and looked at the street below and thought about a man who had walked into a church full of his enemies' social circles with 4 men at his back and 2 words on his lips, and had not asked for a single thing in return for any of it. "I'll be at my sister's if you need to reach me," she said finally. "I know," he said. She ended the call. Lily was standing in the doorway of the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee, having clearly been there for some portion of the conversation, and having the grace not to pretend otherwise. "So," Lily said. "Don't," Sophia said. "I wasn't going to say anything." "You were absolutely going to say something." Lily handed her the coffee. "He sounds different than I expected," she said carefully. "He is different," Sophia said. "The question is what that means. It could mean he's a genuinely good person who made some genuinely bad choices in the direction his life went. It could mean he's very sophisticated about how he presents himself." "It could mean both," Lily said. Sophia drank her coffee. "Yeah," she said. "That's the part that keeps me awake." Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a number she recognized. Jonathan. She stared at his name on the screen. She let it ring. 4 rings. 5. 6. It stopped. Then it started again immediately. She answered. "Sophia." His voice was the same voice she had heard across 100 dinners and 100 careful managed conversations. Warm on the surface, controlled underneath. She had spent 8 months translating warmth and only now understood the language she had actually been hearing. "We should talk." "We are talking," she said. "In person, somewhere quiet." "No." "Sophia." "No. If you have something to say to me, say it now." A pause. "What happened yesterday doesn't have to define everything," he said. "I understand you were under a great deal of stress. I understand Adrian Valenti said things that were alarming, disturbing. I'm not angry. I want you to know that." "I'm not interested in whether you're angry, Jonathan. What I'm saying is that we can still fix this. Your father and I have been talking this morning, and I think there's a path." "Jonathan." Her voice was the same voice she had found in the church. Quiet, clear, absolute. "I know about Meridian Capital. I know about Coastal Bridge. I know about the asset transfer clause, and I know about the spousal testimony exemption, and I know exactly why you needed a wife instead of a business partner." She paused. "I have a lawyer. The documents are with multiple parties in multiple locations. And if you apply any pressure to my family, to me, or to anyone I care about, everything becomes public. Everything." Silence. "You've been talking to him," Jonathan said. His voice had changed. The warmth was completely gone now. She was finally, after 8 months, hearing the actual voice. "You trust a mafia boss over—" "I trust the documents," she said. "The documents that have your name on them." "This is a mistake," Jonathan said. Not threatening. Almost quiet. The voice of a man recalculating. "Good," she said. "Then we understand each other." She ended the call. Her hands were shaking. She put the phone on the counter and pressed both palms flat against the cool surface and breathed. Lily put a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked. Sophia thought about the last 24 hours. The agreement she'd found at 6 in the morning. The walk down the aisle. The door opening. The bench in the autumn light. The attorney's office. The phone calls. The steady accumulating weight of a life being disassembled, and something else, something unspecified, assembling in its place. "I'm terrified," she said honestly. "I know," Lily said. "And I'm also," she searched for the word. "I'm also more myself than I have been in years, maybe ever." Lily squeezed her shoulder. "That tracks," she said. Outside on the street below, a dark car sat half a block from the building. Not following, not intruding, just there. Sophia noticed it and didn't say anything about it, because some things she was learning could just be allowed to be what they were without demanding an explanation, even if they came from a direction she hadn't expected. Even if they carried a name that everyone else said, like a warning. She picked up her phone and opened Catherine Reyes's number. There was work to do, and for the first time in a very long time, she was going to be the one doing it. Catherine Reyes called on Thursday morning, 4 days after the wedding that never happened, and her voice had a quality to it that Sophia had already learned to read, the careful, controlled tone of an attorney who had found something significant and was deciding how much to reveal before the meeting. "I need you in my office at 10, Catherine said. "Bring your father if he's willing." "What did you find?" 10 o'clock, Catherine said. "Some things need to be said in person." Sophia was there at 9:55. Her father arrived 2 minutes later, looking like a man who had not slept in 4 days, which was accurate because he hadn't. She could see it in the way he moved, careful, deliberate, the controlled movement of someone who was afraid that if he stopped being careful for even a moment, something would break. He sat beside her across from Catherine's desk, and she felt the strange doubling of the last week. This was her father, the man she had been angry at, frightened for, disappointed by, and fiercely protective of all at the same time, and she still didn't have a clean way to hold all of that at once. Catherine didn't make them wait. "The shell company structure Jonathan used to acquire the debt has a problem," she said, opening a folder. "Delaware registration for Meridian Capital was filed 11 months ago. The debt it purchased from the original commercial lenders was debt that Bennett Industries incurred 14 months ago." She looked up. "Jonathan Hale was building the infrastructure to acquire your debt 2 months before you even approached him for investment." Sophia heard her father exhale sharply beside her. "I wasn't responding to a crisis," Sophia said slowly. "He created the conditions and then presented himself as the solution." "That's what the timeline suggests," Catherine said, "which changes the nature of what he did significantly. This isn't opportunistic acquisition of distressed debt. This is a structured scheme to manufacture a crisis, embed himself as the rescuer, and extract a specific outcome." She paused. "In this case, marriage to the founder's daughter and controlling interest in a 3-generation family company." The room was quiet. Her father made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "He targeted us," he said. "He targeted you," Catherine confirmed. "Your company, your family, your daughter, specifically and deliberately." She closed the folder. "Which means every agreement signed under those circumstances, the debt purchase, the asset transfer, all of it was signed under conditions Jonathan manufactured. That's the foundation of a fraud claim, and it's a strong one." "How strong?" Sophia asked. "Strong enough that I've been on the phone with 2 federal investigators this morning who are very interested in the pattern." Catherine looked at her steadily. "Jonathan Hale has done this before. Not identically, he's varied the approach each time, but the structure is the same. Manufactured crisis, manufactured rescue, extraction of assets through personal or professional entanglement." She paused. "There are 4 other families." Sophia felt the ground shift under her feet, even though she was sitting perfectly still. "4 other families," she repeated. "The other cases were quieter. 2 settled out of court under non-disclosure agreements. 1 simply disappeared. The 4th is still unresolved." Catherine looked at both of them. "You are the first person who refused. At the altar in public in front of 300 witnesses, including, as it turns out, a journalist who was very interested in what she saw." "The Tribune," Sophia said, remembering Adrian's comment in the church. "The story runs Sunday," Catherine said. "The second shift. Bigger than the first." "Sunday," her father said. "That's 3 days." "Jonathan knows about the story," Catherine said. "He's been aware since yesterday. He's already retained 3 attorneys and filed for a preliminary injunction to stop publication. He won't get it. First Amendment grounds are too strong, but the attempt tells us something." "He's scared," Sophia said. "He's in a different position than he was 6 days ago," Catherine said carefully. "Which makes him more dangerous, not less. A man with everything to lose, and a legal team working around the clock, is not a man who accepts the situation quietly." Sophia thought about Jonathan's voice on the phone 2 days ago. The warmth stripped away. The actual voice underneath. "He's going to move," she said. "Before Sunday." "That's my assessment," Catherine said. "Which is why I needed you here this morning." She reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. "This was delivered to my office last night," she said. "Hand-delivered, no return address." She opened it and laid 3 photographs on the desk. Sophia and her father both leaned forward. The first photograph was of Sophia leaving Lily's building yesterday morning, taken from a distance but clear. The second was of her father's car parked outside Catherine's office the day before. The third was of Lily walking to a coffee shop 2 blocks from her apartment taken from across the street. Sophia felt something cold settle in her chest. "He's having us followed," she said. "He's sending a message," Catherine corrected. "The photographs themselves aren't a threat. There's nothing illegal about taking pictures of people on public streets. But delivering them to your attorney's office is a message. He wants you to know he's watching. He wants you to feel it." "He wants me to be afraid," Sophia said. "Are you?" Catherine asked. Sophia looked at the photograph of her sister buying a coffee, completely unaware she was being captured. Something moved through her that was not fear. It was the opposite of fear. It was a kind of anger, so clean and clear that it felt almost like calm. "No," she said. "I'm angry." Catherine nodded once, like that was the right answer. "There's one more thing," Catherine said. She paused, choosing her words. "The documentation I was provided when you first retained me, the documentation that came through the mutual acquaintance, was more comprehensive than I initially disclosed to you." Sophia went still. "How comprehensive?" "Adrian Valenti's organization has been monitoring Jonathan Hale's activities for approximately 14 months. Catherine held her gaze. "They have financial records, communication logs, property transfers, and the names and locations of the other 4 families. All of it was prepared and held, apparently waiting for a specific moment." "Waiting for me to say no," Sophia said. "Waiting for someone to say no publicly," Catherine said. "Someone whose refusal would be credible, documented, and witnessed by enough people to be impossible to quietly bury." She paused. "You gave him the moment he needed. Walking out of that church in front of 300 people, and a Tribune journalist gave every piece of documentation Adrian Valenti had accumulated a living, public, unimpeachable context." The silence stretched. Her father turned slowly to look at her. "So Adrian," he started. "Was positioned," Sophia said. She felt the ground under her settle and then shift again. "He had everything ready. He just needed the right moment to use it." "Yes," Catherine said. "And I was the right moment." "You were the right person," Catherine said with emphasis. "There's a difference. He couldn't manufacture what you did. He couldn't predict it. What he could do was be ready when it happened, and be ready to support it when it did." Sophia sat with that distinction. She had spent 2 days asking herself what Adrian wanted, what the cost was, whether she was being used. And the answer was complicated in a way she hadn't anticipated. Not yes and not no, but something more nuanced and harder to feel clean about. He had needed her courage. She had provided it without knowing he was watching. And now she was inside something larger than her own family's crisis, and she needed to decide whether that made her angry or whether it made her something else. "He used me," she said. "He supported you," Catherine said, with full knowledge that the support served his purposes as well. She paused. "Whether those are the same thing depends on your definitions." Sophia looked at the photographs on the desk. Her sister's face captured without her knowledge. She picked up her phone. Adrian answered on the first ring. "You knew," she said. "No greeting, no preamble. You've been building a case against Jonathan for over a year. You knew about the other families. You knew about the pattern. You walked into that church not just because of a debt, but because I was the right moment." A pause. "Yes," he said. She had expected a denial, or a deflection, or the sophisticated reframing that a man like him would have available to him. The flat, immediate yes stopped her completely. "You could have warned me," she said. "Beforehand. You had my information. You knew what was happening to my family. You could have come to me privately and told me everything." "I thought about it," he said, and I decided you would have been more afraid than angry. A private conversation tells you there's a problem you can't yet verify. A public moment, your own decision gives you power. I can't manufacture for you." He paused. "I was wrong not to tell you. I made a calculation instead of a choice. I'm sorry for that." Sophia pressed her hand flat against the window glass, feeling the cold of it. "Are you sorry because it was wrong?" she asked. "Or because you got caught?" "Both," he said. "But mostly because you deserved the choice." She breathed. "Jonathan sent photographs to my attorney's office," she said. Of me, my father, my sister. The quality of Adrian's silence changed. When? Last night. Lily. It wasn't a question. The way he said her sister's name immediate sharp told her he had already understood the implication before she finished the sentence. He's escalating, she said. He's panicking, Adrian said. Which is more dangerous than calculated aggression. A panicking man doesn't always do the rational thing. What do we do? You and your father go somewhere that isn't either of your usual locations today. Don't tell anyone where except Catherine. Lily goes somewhere she can't be easily found. He paused. And I need to make a call. To who? Someone who can communicate to Jonathan's people that certain lines shouldn't be crossed. You mean you're going to threaten him? I'm going to establish clarity about consequences, he said. Which is the same thing said more accurately. She thought about what Catherine had told her. The other 4 families. The pattern. Jonathan having done this before and gotten away with it because nobody had a public documented refusal to build a case around. She thought about the Tribune story running Sunday. She thought about 3 days. Adrian. She paused. The journalist at the church. Did you arrange for her to be there? A beat. I may have mentioned to a contact that the wedding of the daughter of Bennett Industries and Jonathan Hale might be worth attending. That's a yes. That's a yes, he agreed. She absorbed it. You're good at this, she said finally. Not admiration. Assessment. I've had to be, he said. She ended the call and turned back to Catherine and her father. Her father was watching her with an expression she had never seen on him before. Not the managed, careful face. Not the patriarch face. Just her father. Looking at his daughter. Looking at something in her he was encountering for the first time. You're not afraid of him, her father said. Not Jonathan. Adrian. No, she said. Why not? She thought about it honestly. Because he answers my questions, she said. Even when the answers are bad. He doesn't manage me. She looked at her father. I have had enough of being managed. Her father looked at his hands. I did that to you, he said. Yes. For a long time. Yes. I thought I was protecting you. I know, she said. That's the part I'm working on forgiving. They left Catherine's office separately as instructed. Sophia took a cab to a hotel 3 miles from Lily's apartment, paid cash, and checked in under Catherine's firm's corporate account. Lily was already there when she arrived, having been called by Sophia 20 minutes earlier, with instructions that were brief and left no room for questions. Okay, what is happening? Lily said the moment Sophia walked in. Sophia sat down on the edge of the bed and told her everything. All of it. Not the managed version. Not the protective version. The real version, the one she had been promised to herself she would start telling now, instead of the comfortable lie. Lily sat through it without interrupting, which for Lily was remarkable, and when Sophia finished, Lily was quiet for a long moment. He had you followed, Lily said finally. Jonathan. Yes. There's a fee. Yes. Lily looked at the wall. I want to do something about that, she said. So do I. What are we doing about it? We're staying here today while Catherine moves the legal pieces and Adrian... Sophia paused. Does whatever it is Adrian does. Lily turned to look at her. And you trust him to do that? I trust him to do what he says he's going to do, Sophia said carefully. Which isn't the same as trusting him completely, but it's enough for today. Lily considered this. He's in love with you, she said. Lily. I'm not being romantic about it. I'm just saying what I observed. The way he looked at you in that church. That wasn't calculation. She shrugged. I'm just noting it. It doesn't matter right now, Sophia said. It matters a little. Lily. Okay. Lily held up her hands. We're staying here. We're being careful. And we're trusting the Mafia boss to handle things. She paused. This is genuinely the most interesting week of my life. Despite everything. The fear. The anger. The photographs on Catherine's desk. The 3 days until Sunday. Sophia almost laughed. She didn't get the chance. Her phone rang. Her father's name. She answered immediately. "Jonathan called me," her father said. His voice was not the managed voice, not the patriarch voice. It was the voice of a man who was frightened. He knows about the federal investigators. He knows Catherine has been talking to them. A pause. He said if the Tribune story runs, he will release information about Bennett Industries' financial practices from the last 4 years. He said there are irregularities. He said they could be interpreted as fraud. Sophia felt her blood go cold. "What irregularities?" she asked. "Accounting decisions I made during the crisis period. Decisions that looked different in context, that were designed to buy time, not to deceive, but that could be misrepresented as..." Her father stopped. "He's threatening to make me look like a criminal if I cooperate with the investigation." Sophia stood up. "Dad, are the accounting decisions actually fraudulent?" "No." Immediately firmly. "No, they're aggressive. They're the decisions of a man trying to keep a company alive. A skilled prosecutor could misrepresent them, but they wouldn't win a case. But the process would be damaging regardless." "The process would be devastating," her father said quietly. "Even if we eventually prevailed the investigation alone, the publicity it would destroy whatever is left of the company's reputation." Sophia walked to the window, looked out at the city. Jonathan had been thinking 3 moves ahead. While she had been moving pieces into position, the attorney, the documentation, the journalists, he had been preparing his counter. He was going to burn her father to the ground to protect himself. She called Adrian without ending the call with her father. She could do that 3-way. It hold both phones, create a bridge. "Jonathan is threatening my father," she said the moment Adrian picked up. "He says he has evidence of accounting irregularities that he'll release to discredit him with the federal investigators." A pause. "Does he have it?" "He has something. Whether it's as damaging as he's claiming, probably not. But the threat is real." "He's drawing a line," Adrian said. "He's telling you the cost of letting the Tribune story run." "I know what he's doing," she said. "I need to know what we do about it." "We let the story run," Adrian said immediately. Her father's voice from the other phone. "Sophia, hear me," Adrian said. "If you pull back now, he wins. Not just the negotiation, everything. He goes back to operating the way he's operated for 6 years, and the next family he targets has no precedent, no public record, no context. You pull back, and he is protected." A pause. "Your father's accounting decisions. I have those records too. My team reviewed them when we were building the case. They're defensible. Aggressively defensible. He won't be convicted of anything because there's nothing to convict him of. But the investigation happens either way," Adrian said. "He's going to report those irregularities regardless of what you do because he needs to discredit your father before Sunday. The story triggers it, or his accusation triggers it. The investigation is coming no matter what you decide." His voice was steady. "The difference is whether you face it having exposed him or having protected him." Sophia pressed the phone harder against her ear. "Dad," she said to the other line. "Did you hear that?" "I heard it," her father said. "Do you believe it?" A long pause. "It's logical," her father said. "I don't want it to be true, but it's logical." "Is there anything in those 4 years that you're genuinely ashamed of?" she asked. "Not afraid of. Ashamed of." Another pause. Longer. "No," her father said finally. "I made hard choices. I didn't make dishonest ones." "Then we let the story run." "Story run," Sophia said. Silence from both lines. Then her father said quietly, "Okay." She ended both calls. Lily was watching her from across the room. "You just decided that," Lily said. "Yes." "You looked scared, and then you decided anyway." "Yes." "That's very..." Lily searched for the word. "That's very you. The real you." Sophia sat down. Her hands were shaking again. They had been shaking on and off for 4 days, and she had decided to stop being embarrassed about it. Shaking hands in a situation like this were not weakness. They were the body being honest about the stakes. "What happens now?" Lily asked. Now we wait for Jonathan to make the next move, Sophia said. Because he's going to. She didn't have to wait long. At 6 in the evening, 2 days before the Tribune story, Jonathan appeared. Not by phone. Not through lawyers. In person. He called from the lobby of the hotel, which meant he knew exactly where she was. Her stomach dropped. She answered the house phone with a steadiness she manufactured from nothing. "Come down and talk to me," Jonathan said. "Just the two of us. 5 minutes." "No." "Sophia, you had my sister photographed. You threatened my father. And you found where I'm staying, which means you've been tracking my movements in a way that your attorney is going to have a very hard time explaining." She paused. "That's 3 separate things I'm adding to the documentation right now. I need to talk to you." "We are talking. In person, please." And there it was, the warmth back in his voice, the practiced version, the one she had spent 8 months misreading. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here because I think we can resolve this without destroying each other." "Jonathan." She kept her voice level. "Every conversation we have from this point forward is recorded. Are you aware of that?" A pause. "You wouldn't?" "I would," she said. "And I have been since Tuesday. Your attorney already knows. Catherine informed them this morning." She paused. "So if you'd like to have the conversation about resolving this without destroying each other, I'm willing to have it. On the record." Silence. "You've changed," he said. "I have," she agreed. "He changed you." "I changed me," she said. "He just opened the door." She heard him breathe. "This isn't going to end the way you think," he said. And now the warmth was entirely gone again, and the actual voice was back, the one with edges. "I have resources you haven't touched. Relationships you don't know about. The Tribune story is going to run, and people are going to read it, and a week later they're going to forget about it and move on. That's what people do. They move on." "Maybe," Sophia said. "But the federal investigators don't move on. The other 4 families' attorneys don't move on. And Catherine Reyes definitely doesn't move on." She paused. "Go home, Jonathan." He was quiet for a moment. "Tell Valenti," he said, "that we need to have our own conversation." "Tell him yourself," she said. She hung up. She sat on the edge of the bed and breathed for a full minute. Then she called Adrian. "He found the hotel," she said. "I know. He's leaving now. You're watching the hotel." "I'm watching you," he said. Quiet. Factual. Without apology. "Did you hear the conversation?" "No. The lobby phone isn't monitored." "He said he wants to talk to you." A brief pause. "I expected that." "What does he want?" "An arrangement," Adrian said. "He's going to offer me something: territory, a contract, a financial interest in exchange for pulling back." "Will you?" The pause was so brief it barely existed. "No," Adrian said. She believed him. She believed him the way she had not believed Jonathan in 8 months of proximity and rehearsed warmth. She believed him the way she believed Catherine's legal analysis, not because she wanted to, but because the evidence assembled itself into something that could not be argued with. "The story runs Sunday," she said. "The story runs Sunday," he confirmed. And then we deal with whatever he does next," Adrian said. "Together." She noticed the word. She sat with it. She didn't argue with it. Because somewhere in the last 4 days, between the bench in the autumn light and the hotel lobby phone, and 3 days of building something out of the wreckage of a life she had been living wrong, she had stopped being afraid of that word. Together. From a direction she hadn't expected. From a man whose name everyone said like a warning. She thought about what Lily had said. She thought about a door opening in a church. She thought about the difference between a man who needs you afraid and a man who answers your questions even when the answers are bad. "Adrian," she said. "Yes. The next time you make a calculation instead of a choice where I'm concerned." "I'll tell you first," he said. "Yes," she said. "You will." She ended the call. 2 days until Sunday. 2 days until everything changed. She was ready. The Tribune story ran at 6 in the morning on Sunday. Sophia was already awake when it dropped. She had been awake since 4, sitting in the hotel room with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, watching the sky outside shift from black to gray, thinking about all the ways the next 24 hours could go wrong, and all the ways they might against the odds go right. Her phone lit up at 6:03. Catherine Reyes. It's live. Read it. She read it. The journalist's name was Karen Marsh, and she had spent 6 days doing the work that turned a dramatic church scene into something with real structural weight. The story was not sensational. It was precise. It named Meridian Capital and Coastal Bridge Holdings. It laid out the timeline the shell companies created before Jonathan approached her father, the debt purchased quietly, the manufactured crisis, and manufactured rescue. It named the 4 other families all anonymously, but with enough detail that anyone familiar with the city's business circles would recognize them. It quoted a federal investigator on background confirming an active inquiry. It quoted Catherine on record. It quoted Sophia directly, a single sentence she had given Karen Marsh in a 15-minute phone call. Friday afternoon chosen carefully, I walked down that aisle because I didn't know I had another choice. It turns out I did. By 6:30, the story had 4,000 shares. By 7, it was the most read article on the Tribune's website. By 7:15, Sophia's phone had received 62 messages from numbers she recognized and 37 from numbers she didn't. She read none of them. She called Adrian. "It's running," she said. "I've read it," he said. He sounded like he had been awake as long as she had. "Karen did good work." "What happens now?" "Now we find out what Jonathan does in the next 6 hours," Adrian said. "He'll have a response prepared. His attorneys will have drafted something last night. The question is whether he goes with the dignified denial or the aggressive counterattack. Which one is more dangerous for us?" "The aggressive counter," he said immediately. "The denial is a defensive posture. It concedes that the story is significant enough to require defense. The counterattack means he's decided to treat this as a war rather than a crisis." "And which one do you think he'll choose?" A pause. "I think he'll start with the denial," Adrian said, "and move to the counterattack when the denial doesn't hold." "How long before the counterattack?" "By tonight," he said. "Maybe sooner." She finished her cold coffee in one long drink. "My father is going to be targeted," she said. "The accounting irregularities. Jonathan threatened to report them. He's going to follow through." "Yes. Today." "Probably this morning," Adrian said. "He needs to create a counter-narrative before the Tribune story establishes itself as the dominant one. He'll report your father to the SEC or the DA's office, or both release whatever documentation he has to a friendly journalist and try to shift the story from Jonathan Hale defrauded 5 families to Bennett family patriarch under investigation for financial misconduct." Sophia closed her eyes. She had known this was coming. She had decided standing in that hotel room 2 days ago that the story ran regardless. She had made the choice with full awareness of the cost. It still felt like a fist in the chest when Adrian laid it out that plainly. "My father can't go through an investigation," she said. "His health," she stopped. "Tell me," Adrian said. "He had a cardiac event 8 months ago. Minor, the doctors said, but 8 months of stress on top of it." She pressed her fingers against her forehead. "He's not as strong as he looks." Silence on the line. "Sophia." Adrian's voice was careful. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it the way it's intended. Tell me. The federal investigation is not going to destroy your father. The documentation I turned over to the investigators includes a full accounting analysis of Bennett Industries for the past 4 years, prepared by a forensic accountant. It specifically addresses the aggressive moves your father made during the crisis period and contextualizes them against the manufactured conditions Jonathan created." He paused. "The investigators already have exculpatory documentation. They've had it since Wednesday." She absorbed this. "You prepared for this," she said. "I prepared for everything Jonathan was going to do," he said, "because I know how he operates. You could have told me. I'm telling you now." "Adrian." Her voice was controlled, but only barely. "I spent 2 nights lying awake terrified that my father was going to be investigated and destroyed. And you had documentation that addressed that specific concern since Wednesday. Yes, he said. That's another calculation instead of a choice. The pause was long. Yes, he said. It is. I'm sorry. She breathed. She wanted to be angrier at him than she was. The problem was that she understood with a clarity that frustrated her exactly why he had done it. He was a man who had operated by controlling information for so long that the instinct ran deeper than decision. It was reflex. Give people what they need when they need it, not before, because before creates variables. It was how he had survived. It was also she was going to have to tell him directly, not how she was going to allow their relationship to function. But that was a conversation for after the crisis, not during. Okay, she said. What do we do this morning? Your father needs to be with his attorney when Jonathan's report hits, Adrian said. Not Catherine, his own attorney, someone who can respond to a regulatory complaint. I can recommend someone. He has someone, she said. I'll call him. And you need to be visible today, Adrian said. Don't hide. Jonathan wants you frightened and contained. The opposite of that is you being public, confident, accessible. The Tribune story has your voice in it. People are reading it right now. Your visibility today reinforces that this is a woman who made a choice and is standing behind it. You want me to make statements. I want you to make one statement, he said. Brief. Clear. Your words, not Catherine's, not mine. Something that makes it impossible to frame you as a victim. She thought about that. Because a victim can be dismissed, she said. A woman who chose can't be. Exactly. She stood up. Give me an hour, she said. The statement she gave was 47 words long. Catherine reviewed it in 12 minutes and called it legally clean. Lily read it and said it sounded like Sophia, which was the most important thing. She sent it to Karen Marsh at the Tribune, who published it as an addendum to the original story at 9:15. I did not leave that church because I was told to. I left because I finally understood what I was actually agreeing to. Every woman deserves to know what she's signing before she signs it. I do now. I'm not going back. By 10 o'clock, it had been quoted by 7 other outlets. By 10:30, Jonathan Hale's attorneys released a formal statement calling the Tribune story reckless, defamatory, and based on fabricated documentation from known criminal sources. Known criminal sources. Adrian Valenti. Sophia read the statement in Catherine's office, where she and her father had gathered at 9, with coffee and the specific kind of controlled tension that comes from waiting for things you know are coming but can't time precisely. He's going after Adrian, her father said. He's trying to discredit the documentation, Catherine said, already typing. If the documentation came from Valenti, he argues it's tainted, inadmissible, the product of a criminal enterprise with competing interests. Is that going to work? Sophia asked. In a criminal court, the origin of evidence matters significantly, Catherine said. In a civil fraud claim and in the court of public opinion, it's much harder to make that argument when the documentation is corroborated by public records, regulatory filings, and the testimony of multiple parties. She looked up. He's going to try. It's a reasonable strategy, but it's not going to hold. Sophia's phone lit up. Adrian. He's using you, she said when she answered, trying to discredit the documentation because of the source. I expected that, Adrian said. There was something in his voice she hadn't heard before, not tension exactly, but a heightened quality, a sharpness. Are you at Catherine's? Yes. Stay there, he said. I have a meeting in 40 minutes that you need to know about. With who? Jonathan's lead attorney called my office this morning, Adrian said. He wants to negotiate, on Jonathan's behalf. The room went quiet. Sophia looked at Catherine, who had stopped typing. He's trying to deal, Sophia said. He's trying to find out how much this costs him to make go away, Adrian said. And he's trying to determine how far I'm actually willing to take this. What are you going to tell them? I'm going to listen, Adrian said. And I'm going to tell you everything they say within an hour of the meeting ending. Adrian. I'm not negotiating your case, he said immediately. Catherine negotiates your case. I'm listening to what they offer me, which tells us what they're afraid of and how far they're willing to go." She understood the distinction. She didn't love it. "Tell me everything," she said. "Not an edited version. Everything." "Everything," he confirmed. He called her at 12:40. "Tell me," she said. "They offered me a commercial real estate contract worth $18 million over 3 years," Adrian said. His voice was flat and factual. "Guaranteed returns, preferred access to 3 development projects, Jonathan controls, and a complete withdrawal from any involvement in your family's situation." Sophia set down her coffee cup very carefully. $18 million, she said. "Yes." "To walk away from us." "Yes." She felt her father look at her from across the table. She didn't look back. "What did you say?" she asked. "I said I needed 48 hours to consider it," Adrian said. The room tilted. "You what?" "I said I needed 48 hours, he repeated. "Because if I reject it immediately, he knows I'm not motivated by money. And if he knows that, he starts looking for a different kind of leverage. 48 hours tells him I'm considering it, which means he waits instead of escalating," she breathed. "You're buying time," she said. "I'm buying 48 hours for Catherine to file the fraud claim and for the federal investigation to formally open," he said. "Once both of those are on record, Jonathan's ability to negotiate a private resolution drops to almost nothing." She was quiet for a moment. "You turned down $18 million, she said. "I didn't turn it down," he said. "I delayed the rejection." "You were going to turn it down." "Yes," he said, simply, without drama. She pressed her fingers against her eyes. She thought about a man who had built an empire, who understood money and power and leverage better than most people would in 10 lifetimes, who had just been offered $18 million to step back from a situation that was genuinely complicated and genuinely costly and had nothing to do with him except for a debt he'd decided to pay. And he had said he needed time to think about it. Not because he was thinking about it, because she needed the time. "Adrian," she said. "Yes." "After this is over." She stopped herself. This was not the moment for that conversation. "After this is over, we're going to have a significant conversation." A pause. "I know," he said. "About the calculations." "I know." "And about the $18 million. A different pause, shorter. "That one I'm less worried about." She ended the call. Her father was watching her. "He turned down $18 million, her father said. "He's delaying the rejection," Sophia said, automatically repeating Adrian's phrasing. Her father looked at her for a long moment. "Sophia," he said. "Don't," she said. "I'm just... Dad." She met his eyes. "I'm aware. I'm very aware. Can we please get through the next 48 hours before anyone says anything about it?" Her father raised both hands in surrender. Catherine's filing hit the court system at 2:15 that afternoon. Civil fraud claim against Jonathan Hale Meridian Capital LLC and Coastal Bridge Holdings on behalf of Richard Bennett and Bennett Industries. 42 pages of documentation. 3 independent forensic analyses, and the names and supporting declarations of 2 of the 4 other families who had decided after reading the Tribune story that morning that silence was no longer the safer option. At 2:40, the DA's office confirmed publicly that an investigation into Jonathan Hale's business practices had been opened. At 3, Jonathan's PR team released a second statement. This one was shorter, less aggressive. The language had shifted from defamatory to disputed, from fabricated to context-dependent. He was retreating. Not far, not fast, but the direction had changed. Sophia read the statement in the back of a cab on the way back to the hotel to change clothes, and felt something release in her chest that had been locked tight for a week. Not victory, because it wasn't over, but the sensation of a tide turning, of physics beginning to favor a different direction. Her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She answered. "Ms. Bennett?" The voice was male, older, careful. "My name is Gerald Hale, Jonathan's father." She went still. She had never spoken to Gerald Hale. She had met him once at a dinner 8 months ago. He had seemed like a background figure, pleasant vague, the kind of wealthy older man who exists at events without particularly driving them. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I'm going to say something to you that I should have said 6 months ago," Gerald Hale said. "I knew what Jonathan was doing, not all of it, but enough, and I said nothing because I believed he would moderate himself. Once the marriage happened, once the acquisition was complete." A pause. "I was wrong about that." Sophia gripped the phone. "Why are you calling me?" she asked. "Because Jonathan has attorneys and a PR firm and 18 different people managing his response right now, and nobody in that entire operation is thinking about the right thing to do." Another pause. "I am an old man, Ms. Bennett, and I have spent 60 years watching people choose the expedient thing over the right thing, and I have done it myself more times than I can count. But I am looking at what my son did to your family, and I am ashamed." She didn't know what to do with that. "What do you want, Mr. Hale?" she asked carefully. "I want to tell you that there is a way to resolve the debt situation that doesn't require the litigation to run for 3 years, he said. "Jonathan's attorneys don't know I'm making this call. He doesn't know I'm making this call. But I have the standing and the resources to settle the legitimate debt claims against your family, retire the shell company instruments, and remove Bennett Industries from the center of this entirely. In exchange for what?" "Nothing," the old man said. "In exchange for nothing, because it's the right thing to do." Sophia stared out the cab window at the city moving past. "Mr. Hale," she said slowly, "with respect, I've spent the last week learning to be very suspicious of offers that come with no visible price." A sound from the old man that might have been a laugh. "That's wise," he said. "The price, if you want to call it that, is that this becomes part of the public record. That Jonathan's actions are not quietly resolved and buried. That the other families get the same resolution you do." He paused. "I have 2 grandchildren from Jonathan's first marriage who are going to grow up in this city with his name. I want that name to be attached to accountability, not to a cover-up." She breathed. "I need to speak with my attorney," she said. "Of course. And with someone else." "Of course," he said again. "I'll call you back within 2 hours." She called Catherine first. Catherine was skeptical thorough and ultimately said the offer was legitimate if the terms were put in writing immediately, and the settlement included a full release of all debt instruments and a contribution to a restitution fund for the other affected families. She called Adrian second. "Gerald Hale just called me," she said, a pause that told her he hadn't expected that. "Tell me," he said. She did. When she finished, Adrian was quiet for a moment. "I didn't see that coming," he said. No. Another pause. "I knew Gerald had distanced himself from Jonathan's business operations over the last 5 years. I didn't know he was willing to—" He stopped. "Huh. What?" "I'm recalibrating," he said. "He says the terms are no strings," she said. "Settlement debt retired. Bennett Industries cleared restitution fund for the other families." "And Jonathan?" "Gerald didn't say. I assume Jonathan's legal exposure continues regardless. Gerald can settle the civil claims, but he can't close the federal investigation." "No," Adrian said. "He can't." A pause. "What does your instinct tell you?" She thought about it. "I think he's a father who is ashamed of his son and is trying to do the one thing he has the power to do before it gets worse," she said. "I think it's genuine." "Your instinct has been right more often than not this week," Adrian said. "I'm taking the offer," she said. "If Catherine gets the terms in writing and they hold." "Okay," he said. "You agree?" "It protects your family," he said. "That was always the point." She felt something tighten in her chest at the simplicity of that. "The point was Jonathan," she said, exposing what he did. "The Tribune story is published," Adrian said. "The federal investigation is open. The civil claim is filed. 2 of the 4 other families are already part of the legal process." He paused. "The point was accountability, not destruction. There's a difference." She sat with that for a moment. "You're more careful about that line than I expected," she said. "I've crossed it before," he said quietly, "and regretted it." She didn't push on that. Catherine had the settlement terms in writing by 5 o'clock. Gerald Hale signed them at 5:40. His signature was calm, deliberate, and completely devoid of the hesitation she would have expected from a man doing something this significant without his son's knowledge. She thought about that. About what it cost a father to correct a son. She didn't have a clean feeling about it. She had a complicated feeling about it that she stored somewhere in the back of her chest for later, for the kind of quiet night when you can take things out and look at them properly. Jonathan found out at 6. She knew because her phone rang at 6:07, and she looked at his name on the screen, and for the first time in a week, she answered it without a carefully prepared script. "Your father settled," she said before he could speak. Silence. "He had no right. He had every right," she said, "and he exercised it." "This doesn't end the federal investigation," Jonathan said. His voice was stripped of everything now. The warmth, the control, the management. Just the raw voice of a man watching his architecture collapse. "You understand that. You've cost me everything, and you haven't stopped anything." "I know," she said. "Everything I built was built on people you decided didn't matter," she said. "That was always going to run out eventually." A long silence. "I thought you were like everyone else," Jonathan said finally. "I thought you'd do what was comfortable." "So did I," she said honestly. Another silence. "Are you satisfied?" he asked. Not angry. Almost genuinely curious. She thought about it. "I'm not satisfied," she said. "I'm just done. There's a difference." She ended the call. She sat in Catherine's office. She had come back after the Gerald Hale call, unable to process any of it, alone in a hotel room. And she put the phone on the desk and pressed both hands flat on the surface and breathed. Catherine was across the desk, watching her with the look of someone who had spent 2 decades watching people at their best and worst and had made a quiet peace with the full range of what human beings were capable of. "The settlement holds," Catherine said. "Bennett Industries is clear. The debt instruments are retired. The restitution fund for the other families is funded." "Yes," Sophia said. "The federal investigation continues independently." "Yes. Jonathan Hale is going to have a very difficult year." "Yes," Sophia said. "And your father's company is intact." Sophia breathed. "Yes," she said. Catherine gave her a moment. Then, "What do you need?" That question again. The same 3 words. She had been hearing them all week from different people, and each time they meant something slightly different, and each time they revealed something about the person asking them. "I need to see my father," she said, "and then I need to see Adrian." Her father was waiting outside Catherine's building. He had been there apparently for an hour, standing on the sidewalk in his good coat, which was too light for the temperature, but which he hadn't noticed because he was too busy watching the door. When she walked out, he opened his arms. She stood there for a moment. Then she walked into them, too. They stood on the sidewalk, her father's arms around her, and she felt 27 years of complexity compress into a single physical moment. All the disappointment and the love and the sacrifice and the damage and the forgiveness that was still in process, not complete, not finished, but begun. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair. "I know," she said. "I'm going to spend a long time making this right." "I know that too." She stepped back. She looked at him. Really looked not at the patriarch, not at the man who had signed the agreement, not at the father who had managed her for 27 years. Just at the person. "We're going to rebuild the company properly," she said. "Together. No more managing me around the important decisions. No more protecting me from the truth." She looked at him steadily. "I want in. All the way in." Her father nodded. "All the way in," he agreed. She squeezed his arm. "Go home," she said. "Sleep. I'll come for dinner tomorrow." He went. She stood on the sidewalk and called Adrian. "It's done," she said. "I know," he said. He would know. He always seemed to know before she called, which was something she was going to have to decide whether she found reassuring or concerning. "Where are you?" she asked. 40 minutes from wherever you are," he said. "Then come here," she said. "I owe you a conversation." The conversation happened in a small restaurant 3 blocks from Catherine's office, the kind of unremarkable place where nobody important chose to be, which made it exactly right for the things she needed to say. She said them directly because she was done with indirection. She told him what she needed from him going forward, if there was going to be a going forward, which she had not yet decided, but which she was no longer ruling out. No calculations presented as choices. No information withheld for strategic reasons. No prepared scenarios that she was moved through without her knowledge. If he made a decision that affected her, she was in the room when it was made. He listened. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain or reframe or rationalize. When she finished, he said, "You're right." "I know I'm right," she said. "The question is whether you can actually do it." He looked at her across the table. "I don't know," he said. "It's not how I've operated for 15 years. The instinct runs deep." He paused. "But I've been wrong about a lot of things this week, and the common element in all of them was the assumption that I knew better than you what you needed to know." He paused again. "I don't know better. I know different things. That's not the same." She looked at him for a long moment. He had dark circles under his eyes. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen on him before. Not the controlled stillness of a man managing a situation, but the genuine exhaustion of a week spent in high-stakes motion without stopping. He looked human. That more than anything else in 7 days was what she had been waiting to see. "I'm not ready to trust you completely," she said. "Okay," he said. "I'm willing to start." Something moved across his face. Not the almost smile she had seen in the church, but something quieter and more genuine. Something that had clearly not been given much room to exist before. "That's enough," he said. Outside the city was doing what cities do after dramatic weeks continuing. People walked past who had no idea what had just shifted inside that unremarkable restaurant. The Tribune story was still being read and shared and discussed. The federal investigation was open. Gerald Hale's settlement was filed. Bennett Industries was intact. And Sophia Bennett, 27 years old, sat across from a man she didn't fully understand yet and felt for the first time in as long as she could remember, like the person she actually was, rather than the person everyone needed her to be. It wasn't an ending. She knew that. Endings were clean, and this was not clean. Her father had work to do. She had work to do. There were conversations ahead that would be difficult and changes that would be slow. And there was a man sitting across from her who had 15 years of instinct to unlearn, and so did she. But something had cracked open. And what came through it was not damage. It was light. She picked up her coffee cup. "Tell me something true," she said. Adrian looked at her. "I have been in rooms with every kind of powerful person this city produces," he said. "And you are the only one I have ever met who got more honest when things got harder instead of less." She held his gaze. "That's a very good answer," she said. "It's a true one," he said. Outside the city kept moving, and inside the most unremarkable restaurant on an unremarkable street, something that had started with a door opening in a church continued becoming something neither of them had planned for. Which was, Sophia was beginning to understand how the best things usually start. 3 months passed, not quietly. Nothing about the aftermath of that Sunday Tribune story was quiet. But the noise was a different kind than the noise of the week before. It was the productive noise of things being processed, examined, and reckoned with, rather than the suffocating noise of things being hidden. Jonathan Hale's legal situation deteriorated steadily through October. The federal investigation expanded from a preliminary inquiry to a full criminal probe by the 3rd week. 2 of the 4 families who had been quietly settled and silenced over the previous 6 years retained attorneys and joined the civil action. The 3rd family's patriarch, a 71-year-old man named Douglas Whitfield, who had spent 4 years believing the loss of his company was his own fault, gave a recorded statement to the DA's office that ran 90 minutes and covered details that made Catherine Reyes call Sophia at 11 at night just to say, "He didn't just do this to your family, he did it as a system, a deliberate repeating system." Sophia sat with the phone pressed to her ear in the apartment she had finally moved into. Not Lily's couch, not a hotel, a real apartment in her own name, chosen for no reason, except that she liked the light in the afternoon, and thought about Douglas Whitfield spending 4 years blaming himself for something that had been designed to look like his failure. "How is he?" she asked. "Angry," Catherine said, "which is the healthiest thing he could be at this point." "Good," Sophia said. Jonathan's attorneys cycled through 3 different defense strategies in as many weeks. The first was aggressive denial. The second, when the documentation proved too comprehensive to deny, was context that the business arrangements were legal, that interpretations of intent were speculative, that the civil claims conflated sharp dealing with criminality. The third, which emerged in November, when 2 of his own former business associates agreed to cooperate with federal investigators, was the strategy of a man who has stopped pretending he can win and started calculating what he can preserve. He did not go to trial. He negotiated. The terms of the federal agreement were not made fully public, but what was disclosed was enough significant financial penalties, mandatory restitution to all 5 affected families, a 5-year bar from serving as an officer or director of any public company, and a civil judgment that effectively dismantled the shell company network that had been the infrastructure of everything he had done. Sophia read the settlement summary on a Tuesday morning, sitting at the kitchen table of her new apartment with a cup of coffee that was actually hot, which she had learned in the past 3 months to treat as a small but real victory. She read it twice. She felt she checked herself carefully because she had spent 3 months learning to be honest about what she actually felt rather than what she was supposed to feel. She felt tired and relieved, and something that was not quite satisfaction, because satisfaction implied a completion that didn't quite fit. What she felt was closer to the sensation of a weight being set down after you have carried it so long you forgot it wasn't part of your own body. She called her father. "It's done," she said when he answered, a long exhale on the other end of the line. "It's done," he repeated. They stayed on the phone without speaking for almost a full minute, which was not something they had done before in 27 years of being father and daughter, and which turned out to feel exactly right. "Dinner Sunday?" her father asked finally. "Sunday," she confirmed. She called Lily next. Lily's response was more characteristically, Lily, a long sustained noise of relief, followed by, "Can we please now talk about something else with our lives? I have been living in a legal thriller for 3 months, and I would like to return to my regularly scheduled existence." "What is your regularly scheduled existence?" Sophia asked. "I don't know anymore," Lily said. "I've forgotten. I think it involved brunch and a book club." A pause. "Also, I need you to tell me what's happening with Adrian." Lily. Sophia. 3 months. "You have been carefully not talking about it for 3 months, which means there is something to not talk about, which means I need to know." Sophia looked at her kitchen window. "It's complicated," she said. "Everything worth anything is complicated," Lily said. "What's actually happening?" What was actually happening was something Sophia had been taking very slowly and very deliberately, because she had learned the cost of moving at someone else's pace, and she was not prepared to repeat that lesson. What was actually happening was dinner twice in October, once in November. Coffee 3 times. A phone call every few days that started as information exchange and gradually became something else. The kind of conversation where you stop tracking what you originally called to say because the conversation itself has become the point. What was actually happening was that Adrian Valenti had, across 3 months of careful, deliberate proximity, proven to be a man who kept his word in the specific way she had asked him to keep it. When he made decisions that touched her life, he told her. When he had information she needed, he gave it directly. Twice she had caught him starting to calculate, she could tell by a particular quality of pause before he answered a question, and both times when she named it, he had stopped and given her the direct answer instead. He did not do it perfectly. He was 15 years of instinct deep into a particular way of operating, and instinct didn't rewire itself because someone asked it to. But he tried, consistently, without being asked twice about the same thing. That Sophia had discovered was rarer than it sounded. "It's slow," she told Lily. "Deliberately slow." "But it's something," Lily said. "It's something," she confirmed. "Good," Lily said. Because the way he looked at you in that church, I still think about that. You've mentioned it. I'm going to keep mentioning it until you acknowledge it. Goodbye, Lily. Sophia. She ended the call. She was smiling. She noticed that. She noted it the way she had been noting things in the past 3 months. Small inventory of what was real, what was different, what was hers. The smile was hers. It came from inside rather than being constructed for a room. She was learning to tell the difference, which had turned out to be one of the more significant projects of the last 90 days. The meeting she had been building toward for 3 months happened on a Wednesday in late November. Not with Adrian. With Bennett Industries' board of directors. Sophia had spent 6 weeks preparing for it. Not in the way she used to prepare for things, not anticipating what the room wanted and shaping herself to provide it. In the way she had started to do everything from the inside out. She had reviewed 4 years of financials, identified 3 structural problems that predated Jonathan's involvement, developed a reorganization proposal that Catherine had reviewed, and 2 independent consultants had assessed as viable, and written a 10-page strategic plan that was the first document she had ever put her name on that was entirely unambiguously her own thinking. Her father had read it the week before. He had sat at his desk with the document in front of him for 20 minutes after he finished it, and then he had looked up at her and said very quietly, "I didn't know you could do this." "I know," she said, "because you never asked." He had nothing to say to that, which was exactly right. The board meeting lasted 3 hours. Sophia presented for 45 minutes. There were questions, some of them skeptical, several of them sharp. The board included 3 men who had been in their positions for 15 years and had comfortable relationships with the status quo, and were not immediately enthusiastic about a 27-year-old proposing to restructure it. She answered every question directly. She did not soften her conclusions to make the room more comfortable. She did not apologize for the ambition of the proposal. When one of the senior board members, a man named Charles Pratt, who had been on the board since her grandfather's time, and who had a specific way of asking questions that was designed to make you feel. The question was generosity rather than challenge. Suggested that perhaps the reorganization was premature, given the company's recent instability. She looked at him steadily and said, "The instability was caused by external fraud that has now been legally resolved. The reorganization is designed to prevent a structural vulnerability from being exploited again." Those are not contradictory points, Charles. They're the same point. Charles Pratt looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. The board voted 4-1 to implement the reorganization proposal. Her father voted yes. She called Adrian from the parking garage, still in her presentation clothes, before she had even gotten to her car. 4-1, she said the moment he picked up. A pause that lasted exactly long enough for her to understand he was genuinely pleased. "Which one voted no?" he asked. "Pratt. He'll come around." She leaned against the concrete wall. "I want to tell you something." "Tell me." "I prepared that presentation for 6 weeks," she said. "Completely independently. I didn't ask you for information or strategy or documentation. I didn't ask Catherine. I used my own analysis and my own conclusions." "I know," he said. "I needed you to know that I know that," she said. "That whatever we're building, it's not because I need you to solve things. I can solve things. I know that better than you do," he said. "I've known it since a 20-year-old walked into a hearing room and told the truth when nobody would have blamed her for not." She breathed. "I need to see you," she said. "Tonight. Not a strategy session. Not an information exchange." She paused. "Just us." The pause from his end was short. "Tell me where," he said. She chose the same unremarkable restaurant where they had sat 3 months ago after the settlement, after everything had shifted. It felt right, not dramatic, not staged. Just the continuation of something that had started in an unremarkable place and deserved to continue in one. How was already there when she arrived, which she had expected. Adrian Valenti was always already somewhere. It was part of how he operated, the preference for position over arrival. She had stopped finding it unsettling. She had started somewhere in the last month, finding it almost comfortable. She sat down across from him. She looked at him directly, the way she had learned to look at things in the past 3 months, without the protective layer of managed expectation, without the interpretation that runs ahead of the evidence. He looked tired in the good way. The way a person looks when they have been working at something real. "The board voted," she said. "You told me." "I want to tell you the rest of it," she said. "The part I didn't say on the phone." He waited. "Standing in that room today, presenting something I built. Answering questions I hadn't been pre-briefed on, holding my ground when Pratt pushed." She paused. "I understood something I've been circling for 3 months." "Tell me." "I am not the same person who stood at that altar," she said. "That woman was someone who had learned to be very small, in very expensive clothes, and she had done it for so long she thought that was just who she was." She met his eyes. "She wasn't. I wasn't." Adrian was very still across the table. "The person I am now," she continued, "made choices under pressure that I'm actually proud of. Not the walking out of the church part that was terror and instinct and your timing. The parts after. The decision to let the story run. The decision to face the investigation rather than protect against it. The board presentation." She paused. "Those were me. Completely me." "Yes," he said, quietly, like a man who has been watching something develop from the beginning and is relieved to hear her say it out loud. "You didn't make me brave," she said. "You opened a door. I walked through it myself." "Yes," he said again. "I need you to know that," she said. "Because whatever this is, whatever we're doing, I'm not coming to it from weakness. I'm not grateful to you in a way that obligates me. I'm not here because you saved me." He leaned forward slightly. "Why are you here?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. She had promised herself 3 months ago that she would stop performing honesty and start practicing it. And the difference was that performance was fast and practice was slow, and she sat with the question long enough to find the real answer. "Because you answered my questions," she said finally. "Even the ones with bad answers. Because when I caught you calculating instead of choosing, you stopped and chose. Because you turned down $18 million and didn't mention it again." She paused. "And because the way you looked at me in that church, not at my dress, not at my family's name, not at the situation at me, I had never been looked at that way before. Like I was specifically myself, and that was specifically the point." The restaurant was quiet around them. The city was outside, continuing its indifferent motion. Adrian reached across the table and put his hand over hers. Not possessively. Not with the proprietary firmness she had learned to recognize as Jonathan's version of contact. Just there. Present. Offering rather than taking. She turned her hand over and held his. "I'm in love with you," he said. Simply. Without preparation or strategy. "I have been since I don't know exactly when. Somewhere between the phone call at 2 in the morning and the 47 words you sent to Karen Marsh." He paused. "I'm telling you because you asked me to tell you things directly, and because not telling you has started to feel dishonest." She sat with it. She didn't feel swept away. She didn't feel the performed flutter of a feeling she had watched herself perform for 8 months with Jonathan. She felt something quieter and more durable, the specific warmth of a true thing landing in a place that was ready to receive it. "I know," she said. "You know. I've known for about a month," she said. "I was waiting for you to tell me directly instead of demonstrating it through careful action." Something moved across his face. "You were testing me." "I was giving you the chance to choose," she said. "There's a difference." He held her gaze. Then he said, "I love you." "I know," she said. "I'm not there yet, but I'm moving in that direction." He didn't flinch at that, didn't push, didn't recalculate. He simply nodded once, like a man who understood that some things take the time they take, and the only correct response is to be present for it. "Okay," he said. She squeezed his hand. "That's the right answer," she said. The thing that happened next happened slowly, which was the only way things worth keeping ever happen. December was a month of dinners that ran past midnight and conversations that started about the company restructuring or the legal aftermath and ended somewhere neither of them had expected. She learned things about him that the city's version of his story didn't include, that he had taught himself to read at 11, using library books because his school was inadequate and his mother was working 2 jobs. That he had taken over the organization at 24, terrified and projecting the opposite of terror, because terror in that world was an invitation. That the thing he had spent 15 years building, the empire everyone feared, was the thing he was most uncertain about when he was honest with himself in the dark. "Do you want to keep doing it?" she asked him one evening in December. "The organization, the way it operates. Do you want to keep doing it?" He was quiet for a long time. "Parts of it," he said finally. "The legitimate parts. The real estate, the development, the businesses that function within the law." He paused. "The other parts, I've been stepping back from the other parts for 3 years. Slowly. Because you can't just stop without creating a vacuum that gets filled by something worse." He looked at her. "But I want to be done with it eventually. I want to build something that doesn't require people to be afraid of me." "That's going to take time," she said. "I know. And it's going to require choices instead of calculations," she said. "Even when the calculation is faster and cleaner." "I know that too." She looked at him. "Then we'll work on it," she said. "Together." The word landed between them differently than it had in October when she had first stopped arguing with it. It was fuller now, more specific. It had 3 months of content inside it. Christmas arrived, and with it the kind of quiet that cities briefly produce when enough people simultaneously agree to slow down. Sophia spent Christmas Eve with her family, her father, her mother, Lily and Lily's boyfriend, who had been navigating Lily's high-drama autumn with impressive calm, and it was the first family gathering in years where she felt present rather than performing presence. Her mother, who had said very little through the entire autumn, in the careful way of a woman who understood she had been complicit in something and was still finding the words for it, found her in the kitchen after dinner. "I want to say something," her mother said. "Okay," Sophia said. "I knew it wasn't right," her mother said. "The engagement. I knew it in the way you know something without letting yourself know it, because knowing it fully would have required me to do something about it, and I—" She stopped. "I didn't do anything about it." Sophia waited. "I told myself you were capable, that you were making an informed choice, that Jonathan was another stop. I told myself a lot of things." Her mother looked at her directly. "I should have asked you. Once. Privately. Away from your father and the business and all of it. Just, are you happy? Are you actually choosing this?" Sophia thought about what that question asked at the right time might have changed. She thought about everything that had happened because it hadn't been asked. She thought about the board vote, the 47 words, the restaurant where she was not yet in love but moving in that direction, the apartment with the afternoon light. "Maybe it worked out the right way," she said. Maybe her mother said, "But I still should have asked." "Yes," Sophia agreed. "You should have." She hugged her mother. Not perfectly. Not the way you hug someone when everything is resolved. The way you hug someone when the resolution is still in progress and you're both committed to it. That was enough. On the last day of the year, Adrian asked her to walk with him. Not to a restaurant, not to an office, not to anywhere with a purpose she could identify. Just walk. Through the city. In the cold. They walked for an hour without a destination, and she talked about the Q1 financial projections for the restructured Bennett Industries, and he told her about a development project on the east side that was the first thing his organization had built that was entirely legitimate, from financing to construction to occupancy. And at some point, the conversation stopped being about anything in particular and became simply the two of them moving through the city that had been the backdrop of everything. They ended up near St. Catherine's Church without either of them directing toward it. She noticed this and said nothing for a moment. Then, "Did you plan this?" "No," he said. She believed him, which was itself a significant thing, that she believed him without requiring evidence, that the 3 months of consistent honesty had built something reliable enough to stand on. She looked at the church doors, the great wooden doors that he had walked through 4 months ago in a black suit, with 2 words that had changed the trajectory of everything. "What were you thinking?" she asked. "When you walked in, what were you actually thinking?" He was quiet for a moment. I was thinking about Maria, he said. My aunt. About what it meant that someone had shown up for her when they didn't have to. About what it means to show up for people. He paused. And then I saw you at the altar, and I stopped thinking and started moving. That's not like you, she said. No, he agreed. It wasn't. She looked at the doors. I was terrified, she said. When they opened, not of you, just the possibility, that there was another direction available, that I was allowed to take it. She paused. Terror and hope feel very similar, it turns out. Yes, he said. I still don't know exactly how this works, she said. What we are, what we're building, how the pieces of your world and my world fit together. She turned to look at him. There are things about what you do that I'm going to struggle with. Things I'm going to push back on. I'm not going to smooth myself down to fit a life I didn't choose. I know, he said, and I'm going to be very, very good at what I'm building, she said. Bennett Industries under my direction is going to be something significant. That's not a plan, it's a fact. And whoever is standing next to me has to be able to stand next to that. I know that too, he said. Can you? He looked at her. A woman who told the truth at 20 years old, because it was right, he said. A woman who read a 37-page legal document at 6 in the morning on her wedding day and still found the strength to say no. A woman who let a Tribune story run, knowing it would cost her family, who stood in front of a board of directors and won 4-1, who told me directly what she needed and held me to it every time I forgot. He paused. I can stand next to that. I would be honored to stand next to that, she breathed. She reached into her coat pocket. Not because she had planned to, because the movement felt correct and she had learned to trust things that felt correct from the inside. She pulled out a key, her apartment key, the one she had cut 6 weeks ago and had been carrying and not giving because she was waiting to feel ready. She felt ready. She held it out. He looked at it, then at her. What is this? He asked. It's a key, she said. Not a ring, not a promise, not a contract. She met his eyes. It's an invitation to the next part, at a pace we choose. He took the key from her hand. He held it like it was something significant, because it was. I'm not there yet either, she said, but I'm moving in the direction. I know, he said. I'll be here when you arrive. She looked at him standing outside the church, where everything had started, holding a key to a door she had opened herself, and she felt something settle in her that had been unsettled for 27 years. Not completion. Better than completion. The specific, durable sensation of being exactly where you chose to be, standing next to exactly who you chose, because you chose it, not because you were pushed, not because you were managed, not because it was the only option that remained. Because you wanted it. Because you chose. The city was loud around them, the last day of the year energy of thousands of people preparing to mark time, to count down, to declare a beginning. She had always found New Year's a slightly manufactured emotion, the arbitrary line between one moment and the next, dressed up as transformation. But standing there, she understood something she hadn't before. The line wasn't in the calendar. The line was in the moment you decided to stop walking in the wrong direction. She had crossed hers at the altar of St. Catherine's Church on a Saturday in autumn, when a door opened and she found somewhere below the terror and the white dress and the 37 pages of someone else's plan for her life that she was not going to say those 2 words. Everything since then, the lawyer, the filing, the story, the board, the apartment, the key in his hand, was not recovery. It was arrival. She was not the woman who had almost said I do because she couldn't find a reason to say I won't. She was the woman who had learned the difference between a cage and a choice and had chosen. She was the woman who had taken the door when it opened, not because someone told her to, but because she finally understood that it was hers to walk through. She was Sophia Bennett, and she was, for the first time in 27 years, completely, undeniably, irreversibly herself. That was not the end of her story. It was the first line of the one she was writing.